Hello and welcome, everybody. Appreciate you joining us today. We've got a ton of people online, shows a lot of interest in 3D metrics, and I am so pleased to have Master PGA Coach Hugh Marr with us today. Hugh, thanks for joining.
My pleasure, Gear. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise. We've had this in the works for a little bit, and today, everybody, you're in for a treat. Hugh is a Ryder Cup coach. He's worked with top level PGA players. He's also a coach to coaches. You've spent a lot of time building the Coach Alliance, a group that is a network of coaches that you're all interacting with and learning from each other. And by the way, everybody who's attending here, we will send out an offer after the webinar. You'll get a 10% discount to join the Coach Alliance. But Hugh, give us a little background on you so everybody kind of knows a little bit more about you, please.
Well, where do I start? Basically, I guess I earned my stripes coaching on European Tour, PGA Tour, Ladies Tour, and I did that for the better part of 20 years. And COVID kind of came along at exactly the right time for me, in that it just turned into a miserable experience traveling, and I think I was about ready to move on to the next phase of my career. So I decided to retire from my 20-year job of babysitting grown adults, and figured, well, I better do something to earn a living. And that's when I really got heavily involved in coach education, because I've been very critical historically of the standard of golf coaching around the world. And rather than be the guy that was going to just be constantly ranting about it on social media, I thought I'd better do something about that and try and contribute to an improvement in the standard of coaching, because I think that fundamentally golf coaches are so crucial to the long-term health of the game of golf. We are central to this sport being a success. We introduce people to the game. We help them get better. We retain them. We create a fun social environment for people. Without golf coaches, the game is in a horrible state. So personally, I think we all need to do a better job. And if I can contribute just a little bit to that, then I think I've left the place in a better place than I found it.
Indeed, your ability to be out there on social media, always providing education opportunities, always creating conversation, I think is really an amazing contribution. And we're going to dive into some stuff today. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover here today. So we are excited to get into some 3D analysis. And of course, this is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. And we're going to cover things like Hugh's coaching process. And I think something that we constantly hear coaches that we speak to are, how are people putting 3D to use? And so we're going to continue to try and bring education opportunities like this to the masses. And we're always open to more ideas. We believe that communication and conversation is the best way to allow coaches to figure out how to use new technology. And we really want to be the platform that coaches can trust. So that's going to take up the majority of today. We'll look at 3D metrics specifically. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can do analysis on your iPad. And at the end of the webinar, which will aim to be 30-45 minutes or so, we'll have a little PGA show update for everybody. Some exciting new features that we're rolling out. And if you're going to be in Orlando next week, please stop by our booth, 873. And we will be showing off some really cool stuff that I'll be talking about at the end of our webinar today. So without further ado, Hugh, let's talk a little bit about coaching process. This is something I know you're passionate about. I'd love for you to just kind of give us an idea of your process and how you think about golf instruction.
Well, I'll start after me saying that I didn't want to be the guy that was ranting. I think that the single most important thing that we can do as coaches is establish really sound systems to analyze and diagnose what our golfers do and what we need them to do to get better. And my system, while it hasn't changed dramatically in the last 20 years, it's constantly being refined. And I compare our profession to the medical profession an awful lot, in that the medical profession has recognized protocols that they go through to diagnose the patients, and then the prescription is based on that. And that's very much the kind of framework that what I do is based around. So in every golf lesson, and I mean every golf lesson, the process starts with me looking at the ball flight, hearing the strike, watching the player move, and I'm getting impact data all the time here, but I'm not referencing the data at this point. I'm trying to do what I call the human analysis. So I'm looking at the human, I'm looking at how they move, I'm trying to read the individual to get a sense of how best to pitch my advice to them. And once I've got an idea of that and identified what the ball wants to do, then I'm going to reference my TrackMan data. I use TrackMan as my launch monitor of choice. And effectively, all I'm doing by cross-referencing the TrackMan data versus what I've seen from watching is that I'm trying to join the dots. I'm trying to identify the impact factors that I need this player to change to hit better golf shots. Now, this might take as much as 45 minutes to an hour with a client that I've never seen before. And I'm getting video all the time. But as soon as I have identified what are the impact factors that I need to shift, or the impact factor, then I will start to go to video. So I will then refer to Onform. So if I've made a decision, so for example, we've got two students that I'll talk through today. One of them was suffering from a shank, so I thought that would be a pretty decent case study. And one of them is a mini tour player who desperately needed to increase speed. So once I've identified what I need this player to do differently, that's when I start looking at the video. So effectively, it makes the process much more streamlined in that my mind isn't distracted by all the things that I could work on. I'm just looking for components that are going to affect the player's shank or the strike, or in the second case study that I do, how it's going to improve the player's ability to generate speed. Now, where 3D fits in there is that, again, I'm using the same process. Once I'm looking at the 3D metrics, I know, for example, that shank could be caused by some lift issues or some sway issues or some thrust issues. So I'm starting to look at the data points that are relevant for what I'm trying to fix with the player. And then I think that I must stress at this point that I am by no means a biomechanist. When I look at graphs, complex graphs, my brain just explodes. So, and I think this is, again, potentially something where the industry can improve, in that gathering the data and even understanding the graphs in itself isn't golf coaching. Golf coaching is the ability to interpret that data and then turn it into something that's accessible and actionable for the student. So one of the things I particularly like about where you guys at Onform have gone with this is that the data points are reasonably limited. They're kept to a fairly low number. I don't have enough time. I'm 53 years old now. I don't have enough time left to become an expert biomechanic. And frankly, I'm not interested in it. I want to make golfers better. And there's no question that having access to a limited amount of 3D data gives me more information. And ultimately, when I'm analyzing and diagnosing a golfer, my sole purpose is to join the dots between everything I see, which helps me make a decision that this is where we're going to go with this player.
Sure. Well, you hit on something, and it's what really drives us, actually, and that is the practical application of complex topics. Biomechanics, we don't want you to have to be a biomechanist to use our product, right? We want to empower coaches, improve their workflows, and get the heck out of the way. If you want to use 3D, great. We would love for you to dive in, but you can turn the entire thing off if you want. If you want to use, multi-angles, launch monitors, those are all things that I think provide great value. But it's our ethos that a coach should be able to coach how they want, and it changes from player to player. You might have an engineer type player that loves diving into the data and you love diving in it with them. You might have a person who can't stand it, doesn't even like looking at themselves on video, but they all have the same common goal. They want to improve at golf, and that's what the instructor is really all about. That's why I love talking coaching with you because you bring that very practical application to it. I wanted to quickly, before we turn it over to you driving the show, share my screen from my iPad because I want to make sure people are on the same basis from the standpoint of how to even navigate 3D on our system. And if the iOS gods are happy, which they don't seem to be all that happy, I will try and share my screen. But of course they are not excited to compliment me there. Well, let's give it one more try with a different plug. And let's see if I can get my iPad up on here because I really do want to show everybody just what we're talking about from a navigation perspective. So here we are in Onform, and I just want you to know, like, these are the data that we have down below. This happens to be a dual angle recording we did outside. We use the full swing launch monitor to trigger the recording, and the 3D data appears by simply tapping on the 3D option in the view pane here. So that's how it calculates the 3D data. You can see it provides the 3D, animated avatar here, and you get all the data down here. But you can adjust the layout such that if you want, you don't even have to show any of that. You could turn the metrics off. You can see I have a hide metrics option down here. You can only talk about the video. You can bring the metrics into play. You can also change the layout to be kind of as fancy as you want. Here we have both angles of video and the 3D avatar, as well as all the 3D data down below. In addition, if you do tap on this, just housekeeping, we also, under this information icon here, have published our model card, which gives you in-depth information about our AI model. We're the only ones to publish the accuracy and limitations of our AI model, and we do it transparently to build trust. We want you to understand the best ways to use it. This tells you the right angles to record from, etc., and tells you how we do all of our measurements. So as a baseline, I just wanted to jump in there quickly and show folks, if you haven't used our 3D stuff inside of Onform, that's where you can go access it. And, I actually learned from you, Hugh, that, the recording angles matter. And I know you have ranted about this a lot. And I want to say recording angles matter in 3D just like they do in 2D. If you record from different angles from time to time, it's going to lead to weird conclusions, right? And you have kind of a tip for just the recording angles alone, I think.
Well, I'll talk about that when I load a swing and
Cool.
talk a little bit more about the metrics themselves, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, let's start diving into that because I think that's what everybody came here really for. And
No,
let's have
Lord.
you take us through how you actually use these tools in your coaching.
Okay, so I'm going to start by explaining my camera setup because I do think that's particularly important. So this is the first case study. This is a guy called Ali, who's a good athlete. He was a professional footballer. He's about a 12 handicap just now. From a camera angle perspective, there's a couple of really key things. I think it's important that you're far enough away so that you're able to zoom in. If you get too close, you don't have that option. I'm viewing from exactly the same position each time. So basically down the line, I have it on a tripod that is level with my belt buckle, and I'm shooting through the hand line parallel to the line of play. Shutter speed is also important, particularly if you're going to access the 3D data. From front on, I'm shooting exactly the same height, again on a tripod, and it's pointed straight at the player's thorax at 90 degrees to the line of play. So I think that's a fairly important thing that we need to be conscious of. Now, just in terms of the data itself, there's Ali. It's worth noting exactly what it means. Okay, so anything that's related to sway is towards or away from the target. Anything relating to lift is up or down, self-explanatory. And when you're looking at a player from down the line, anything relating to thrust is in and out. Fairly important, because if you are showing these data points to your students, then they probably better understand what they are. So I'm going to just run you through exactly what I would do with a student, what I've done with Ali in this instance. And I'm going to draw on the same lines that I always draw on. So the first line that I want to draw on is what I call a shaft plane line. And to give you some background, this guy was hitting a pretty consistent shank to the point where it was starting to get a little bit soul destroying for him. So even if with just that information, not seeing the golf swing and not having any impact data, there's only two reasons a player can shank it. Either the sweet spot is going in that direction, or the club is going too far into the ground. Either, as I said, there is no other option. Now, unfortunately for poor Ali, he was demonstrating both. So I'll draw a shaft plane line on, just like that. Then I'm going to draw a delivery plane line on, and delivery plane in my language is when lead arm is parallel, so P5 for those of you that are familiar with that system. And that gives me a reference point of where the club is in space. I get all my data off a map because I want to get to be able to pick up data all the time. That's not saying that I don't hit off grass, but it's something that every piece of data I've got, whether it's the TrackMan data or whether it's the Onform data, I've got not far off the map. So I'm noticing when I'm going through that kind of human analysis that he is just beating the heck out of my mat, taking chunks out of my mat. So straight away, I know that the club is too deep in the ground. And I think that was probably the predominant reason why he was shanking it. So I'm wanting now to figure out, well, what is it about this player's movement pattern that is causing the club to go that much into the ground? So if you look at where the shaft is at setup, at impact, and then relate it to setup, there's something really interesting happened here. And this is a very unusual character trait in a golf swing, in that his shaft plane is actually flatter through impact than it was at address. Yellow line representing address, red line representing where the club is at impact. So he's trying to do everything he can to bring that club out the ground. The problem being that if he's going to drive the handle this way through impact, that's sending the sweet spot this way, which is yet another factor that's contributing to the shank. That's the sweet spot moving further away from him. So I had to deal with the depth of the golf swing here. And this is where the 3D data points really came in handy. So let's get on to full screen now. So I'm going to draw your attention to a couple of things. The first thing I'd like you to look at is pelvis lift. Okay, so we can see that the pelvis is a full 5 centimeters lower. So I think in inches, that's probably about 2.5, maybe even 3 inches lower. So there we have a component that's driving the club deep into the ground. And I've made the decision that the best way to fix this player is to bring his low point out the ground. Now, if any of you use TrackMan, his low point depth was 14, 15, 16 millimeters down with a 7-iron, which is that's as high as I've seen from any player. So I've identified using the Onform 3D data that his pelvis has got a lot lower. Now that's more difficult to do if we're just going to look at it in 2D. So if I draw 2 lines on here, one was his belt line at setup, the other is his belt line at point of impact. Yes, we can see it's lower, but I would never ever have suggested that it was anywhere like 5 centimeters lower. Then something else really jumped out at me. I said, okay, well, if he's that much lower to the ground when he makes impact, what's causing that? And I think you'll all have probably recognized by now, looking at this golf swing, that the way his lead knee traveled, I thought was a contributory factor. Okay, so I'm going to put a circle around the lead knee and take him down to point of impact. So again, something interesting here, very telling here, is that just pre-impact, his left knee has actually got closer to the floor and way in front of the ankle. So one of the things that I work with on a day-to-day basis in my coaching is I like to have reference points just to check where the player is in space. So if I were to use the skeleton feature on Onform and just draw a vertical line, I never want to see the lead knee getting outside of the lead ankle. Okay. Generally, I'm looking for the lead knee to be working into extension through this phase. And we can obviously see there that the lead knee is way outside of the lead ankle. other little reference points that I'll use is I'll draw circle around the lead shoulder. Where will the lead shoulder be at point of impact? I suspect it's going to be closer to the ground and way ahead of the golf ball. So again, we have yet more evidence that he is losing height. So having taken all that into consideration, I decided that the course of action was to use the left knee to influence how the pelvis worked through impact. Again, my advice is related directly to improving the flow that the player came with. And just as a simple exercise when you're talking about, when you're dealing with shankers, you just have to stop them shanking it. As soon as you stop them shanking it, you've got the opportunity to coach them how to control it. But you cannot deal with a golfer shanking it. You can't make that player better until they've stopped shanking it. Yeah. So let's use the same reference points. So we've got lead shoulder, lead knee. Now, the task I gave him using I've used a foam roller here, another one of my expensive training aids. I've put that just outside his lead ankle. So if you recall, my reference point was that I don't want to see the knee getting outside of the lead ankle. If I line that outside the lead ankle, then he's got some kind of constraint, some kind of incentive. That's the only piece of advice I've given him, is to say, there you go, I'm going to put that beside your left ankle, just don't knock it over. Because obviously if we had the same constraints in place here, he'd be knocking it over every shot.
Amazing.
So let's get to point of impact. And we can see a ton of stuff that's changed. Okay, number one, his lead knee is way more under control. His lead shoulder isn't anywhere near as close to the golf ball. If you look at his pelvis lift number, he's now only 1 centimeter down. And I think he gets to about 0 by point of impact. There you go, 0.7. So with that simple constraint, I've put him then in a position where he's not going to hit the neck. Now, let's just rewind and work through the process again. What's the ball flight? The ball flight's a shank. So straight away, I'm going to explore all of the components, all of the characteristics, whether it's a start position component or whether it's an in-swing component that's resulting in the sweet spot getting too deep in the ground. I felt that the primary cause of his shank was too deep a divot. Then I'm starting to everything. Go on.
Sorry, keep going. I'll ask when you're finished. Sorry.
So I'm now referencing everything relating to the club being too deep in the ground. And as soon as I look at the pelvis lift number, where we know that the pelvis lift is pelvis drop, it's 5 centimeters down, that's certainly a factor that can result in him burying the club in the ground too deep. I've got all of these various different reference points, all of which contribute to me being able to make the most informed decision as to how I can help this player. Bearing in mind, I want this player to hit better shots now, so I'm going to try and find the least invasive way to make that change. I could have explained all of this to the player in the detail that I have to you this evening, but the reality is I think you would have found it very difficult to process that. We need to give them tasks, constraints, drills, training aids, however you see fit, whatever works best for you, to help them process the information that I've given you here. So I explained the club was too deep in the ground. I explained why, and then I said, this is how we're going to fix it. Now, a couple of other little interesting things that I'm finding with increased use of 3D is you start to see patterns with better players. And one of the big patterns that I see is that generally when you start to get into sway numbers, so sway numbers being towards or away from the target, anything over 15 centimeters sway is generally dysfunctional. So because of Ali's left knee action, you can see that his pelvis sway was at 19 centimeters and his torso was at 18 centimeters. Another really useful benefit from relying on 3D, or at least using 3D, is that you start to see the patterns that the best players present with. And generally, bad players don't display the same patterns. So I know, for example, that of all the high-level players and good ball strikers that I've put through this process, I haven't seen any that sway 18, 19 centimeters towards the target from start position. 15 would be about the maximum I'd expect to see. And we can see that both of those numbers, both pelvis sway and torso sway, have improved as a product of the change through the lead knee. But really I'm paying attention to that. I'm recognizing that that's changed. But ultimately, it was all done through needing to get the pelvis more out the floor. And how we were going to do that was working the left knee differently.
So good, Hugh. That was actually amazing for me to watch you use the tool to such an incredible level. I've got a few questions for you. So from the crowd, one of them is, let's just start with some mechanical things.
Mm-hmm.
Shutter speed. Can you show everybody how shutter speed is adjusted? Or I can certainly talk through it, but with your, you can't start the camera. That's gonna,
because I'm on a Zoom call.
yeah, just for everybody to know, shutter speed, it's the button above the record button, and there is no one specific setting because it's dependent on the lighting of your exact setup, whether you're indoors or outdoors. If you're outside in pure sunny conditions, you probably don't need to worry about it because there's so much light. But if you're indoors or it's shady or in the evening, it's an incredible benefit. You saw how crystal clear the video was that he was showing. And you simply drag the little bars. One of them is shutter speed. Drag it to the right until it starts to maybe get a little bit dark. And then use the ISO bar to increase the ISO. But caution, you want to use the least amount of ISO that you can because it will make it grainier as you increase the ISO levels. So it's just a setting that you can experiment with. Once you set it, the app remembers that setting from between recordings. So if you move to a different scenario or it's the next day and you open up the camera and it's all black or it's all white, remember you adjusted the shutter speed and you'll have to go in and reset it. So that's one I wanted to mention. And let's talk on the 3D side. Another question comes up. How often are you sharing the numbers with your students? You alluded to the fact that you could have, but you didn't in this case. What guides your decision on whether you share these types of data with your student?
It's basically a judgment call based on the time I've spent with the player. I think in general, I would probably bias towards explaining the number and showing them the difference in the number. So I've got no issue saying to a student that if you do this and this, then you're going to stop shanking it. Because I know that if they shift the way that I want them to, then they will not hit the neck anymore. So being able to highlight improvements in any data point, I think is really important. It helps your credibility as a coach, which in turn helps the player become as coachable as possible. So if you see significant improvements, every single time I see a significant improvement, I would highlight that to the student straight away. Because it's one of the things we miss as coaches is that getting a student into a coachable state is as important as the quality of coaching. And anything that kind of gives them belief that you're on the right track, I find helps you help the player quicker, more, helps develop a relationship. And that helps develop trust.
I've heard that from other coaches too, that the numbers sometimes back up what the coach is trying to describe, and that it does give the player more confidence in the coach's capabilities when they talk through them like that.
It should be said, Gear, at this point that this comes with a dark side. That if you're measuring the student, whether it's TrackMan data, whether it's 3D data, whether it's force plate data, makes no odds. That if you're not seeing the improvement in the data that you expect to, that's an opportunity for the coach to go away and learn. There's a reason why. Now that reason why is either the student isn't doing it, which is on you to make sure the student does do it, or that is that the information that you've given that student is either flat out wrong or it needs to be done more. So again, we can use this as a feedback loop, not just for the student, but also for us. That if we expect the club to go in a different direction and our advice isn't having that, having the effect that we expect, then that's on us to figure it out. That's an opportunity for a coach to go away and learn and improve.
Great stuff. Hey, can you turn your people would are asking if you turn your camera back on if that's possible.
Absolutely. They really need to see me, do
They,
they?
yeah, they love seeing your face. I mean, look at that. It's great. Cool. That was an awesome example of understanding reference ranges. And we have a question about that, and I'll short circuit it to say stay tuned to the end of the webinar regarding reference ranges, because that might be something we'll be showing at the PGA show in an upcoming release. So I'll have a little hint on that one. Um, Hugh, I think you prepared another one as well, case study. Is that right? Can we check that one out?
We can indeed. So this is Ollie. Ollie plays regional PGA events, national PGA events in this country, in the UK. He plays mini tour events, and he's aspiring to play at a much higher level. Now, this guy swings it beautifully, but there's a problem. He swings it slow, and I mean he swings it really slow. So he presents with 88 miles an hour with 7-iron. Okay, it was a hellish cold day that we did this, but 88 miles an hour with sort of low 120s ball speeds is not getting it done. You're not going to be able to play on Challenge Tour or DP World Tour swinging it at that speed. So this is one of these rare golf lessons where I've actually, in every golf lesson, you're faced with a decision. You've either got to improve the nature of the player's impact, or you've got to improve the speed of the player's impact. And the reality is, I probably give 1 in 100 lessons where it's all about improving the player's speed. The majority of the golf lessons, vast majority, are all about improving the nature of impact. And curiously enough, if you improve the nature of the impact properly, there's a decent chance they'll gain speed anyway. But this one was explicitly about speed. And he didn't think that he was slow. This is a difficult decision as a coach. How honest are you going to be with a student?
Right.
But 88 miles an hour is slow. It's flat out not going to work. Now, if we were to look at the quality of golf swing, we'll just play the golf swing down the line. That's pretty functional looking golf swing. He wants to hit pull fade shots. Interestingly, his data presented with perfect pull fade numbers in terms of the path and face relationship. But the way he constructed the path at his speed was dysfunctional, in that he was hitting 6.5 to 7 degrees down on the ball. That's fine when you're swinging it at Brooks Koepka's speed, where he's moving at 100 miles an hour plus with 7-iron. He can get away with hitting down that much. So this player is not only slow, he's inefficient. And probably the biggest issue that we had to get over, first of all, was, okay, he's not actually trying to hit it hard. An awful lot of what he was trying to do was to control strike and control flight. So straight away, I've made the decision that this is a swing speed session. This is a club head speed session. So I'm looking at all of the factors that influence club speed. And I'll do this quite a lot with students, is if I've got the data points up and I'm going to focus on specific ones, I'm going to focus on tempo in this one. So looking at the mechanics, my instinct was that he didn't move enough pressure right, and the pressure stayed to the right too long. So he's basically living on the right side of the golf ball for far too long in the golf swing. Now, if you look at, again, just a sort of general measure as a baseline for me, the length of time to take backswing, and I'm defining the top of backswing as the sweet spot changing direction, so about there. He's taken 1.3 seconds to get to the top of the backswing. Pretty much every good ball striker has made impact by then. So the tempo is definitely an issue. So 4 point something to 1 is super slow from a tempo perspective. From a mechanical perspective, I needed to see this player move more to the right sooner and start moving left way earlier in the golf swing. So generally, when you're looking at super quick players, their maximum pressure shift to the right has probably happened around this phase, just after P2. And I measured this. I've got smart to move plates. So his maximum pressure shift to the right, he only started moving back to the left about here. So not only is he not shifting enough pressure to the right, it's happening too slowly, and he's not starting to move left early enough in the golf swing. And that all presented with 88 miles an hour. Now, generally, when I'm giving a clubhead speed lesson, the first thing I'm going to ask them to do is stand up and make some free swings. So swing it as fast as they're comfortable swinging it. Straight away, this guy got to 93 miles an hour. So that's a red flag. He has tons of speed in the tank and he's not using it. So this became a lesson, as I said, about speed, and it became about shifting right and extending the trail leg better. So the reason I wanted him extending the trail leg better is that, let me just get the swing up. But looking at him from down the line, I didn't think that he was getting anywhere near enough extension through this phase. And actually, we can see his head starting to get closer to the golf ball. So the swing cues were, right, Ollie, I need you to move more to the right, and I need you to extend that right leg as much as you possibly can. And he would get 71% pressure right, and it would still be there at the top of backswing, which just doesn't happen with high-level players. So,
What just real quick, what do you see with high level players in terms of the pressure distribution between left and right?
I'd say I'd like it to start around 80. 80 would be a decent, but 80 should be happening about this phase. Just moving 80% of your pressure to the right and leaving it there is probably going to make the player worse. So the drill that I would use would be a right foot step drill. That's very good for shifting pressure early and getting the trail leg extended. So I didn't go after the tempo of this golf swing, okay? That became part of the product of the work we did. So he's taken it from 1.3 seconds to 0.8 seconds backswing. If you look at the tempo, and this is a really good metric for people looking to gain speed, he's now got 2.8 to 1, which would be fairly typical for a high standard player, from 4 to 1. Now, I don't, unfortunately, get results like this every day that we're working on speed. He went from an average of 88 to an average of 98 with 7-iron. And interestingly, he didn't feel that he was hitting it any harder. He just felt he was moving better. He didn't even feel like he was moving more. He felt like he was moving better. And actually, when we started to really stand on it and really freewheel it with this backswing move, he got over 102 miles an hour half a dozen times in a row. Now, that wasn't functional because he was starting to hit it all over the face, but at 98 miles an hour, he actually hit it better than he did at 88 miles an hour. This is one of these strange lessons where when he turned up and I watched him, I'm like, yeah, this is a really nice player, but I very much see a ceiling to how good he could get. To when he left the session, I'm like, holy cow, this guy's got something. So that degree of shift is unheard of. You probably noticed that I've got a pool noodle on his head here. I'm using that just to get him to feel that he is shifting and extending in that phase. So in this swing here, or after we made the change, he was shifting 88% pressure right, and that was maxed out about here. Now, I would have given exactly the same golf lesson if I hadn't had force plates, but the beauty of having force plates is that I can A, confirm that what I suspect is happening is actually happening, but B, I'm then able to feed it back to the player effectively. The big thing here was just improving the guy's tempo. That was a really useful metric in this particular golf lesson.
Incredible. And the fact that you take your experience and apply it to which one of the metrics and then hone in on that metric to see the end result. I think that's one of the biggest learnings is when you don't have the numbers at all, you don't know what to work on. But as you give lessons and as you gain experience, you start to correlate what does what to the actual golf swing. And I would guess the only way to really do that is to use the numbers and, get the experience, right? I mean, is there any better way to really understand what correlations those numbers lead to in actual ball flight results?
Yeah, pay attention. It's you were kind enough to give me access to the beta version of this going back to probably October last year. Would that be about right?
Something like that, yeah.
And I had all of the data points up for every swing that I looked at and didn't use them at all until I was started to be comfortable with how they would fit into my coaching system. So it probably took me, I'm going to say I integrated it on a session by session basis probably in July of this year. So I've
Yeah.
spent a good 8 or 9 months just trying to figure out what they mean, how I can use them, where they fit into my coaching system. I think this is one of the great challenges with so much wonderful technology available now, is that it's so tempting just to jump in and use it all the time. I want to take time to figure out how I can use it best. And the truth be told, Gear, if I wasn't able to use this, I would be in the high metrics mode all the time, because it's not something that I can use with it. It wouldn't be something that I can use in my system to make it better and make my players better. So as coaches, I mean, I think a really important piece of advice here is that by all means explore new technology, but don't use it to its full capability until you're really comfortable with how to use it and know that it's going to fit into your system and benefit your system.
Yeah, great advice. A couple technical questions. Right now, our app only calculates those metrics from face on. If you do use a dual angle multicam setup, which you can use multiple, an iPad, an iOS, or an iPhone to capture, we do improve the thrust measurements from the down the line view, because that's much more apparent. But if you want to use 3D, you'll need to record from the face on view. How about we hit a couple of technical questions on 3D, if you don't mind, that come from the audience. Let's see. I think we might have touched this. How would you work on too much pelvis slide, say greater than 15 centimeters, without the knee bowing past the lead ankle?
I'd probably work away from the problem and work further up the chain, because the reality is the player's probably going to miss it unless they're super gifted. So Ryan Fox, for example, would be a good example of someone who moves his pelvis laterally but goes into massive right side bend, and he counteracts that by hanging onto the shaft for dear life. Most of the club players that we're coaching on a day-to-day basis, and I must stress that I don't spend my entire life working with elite level players. Today I've given 3 golf lessons, one of them to a Challenge Tour player, one of them to an 18 handicapper, and one of them to a teaching pro. So the reality is you have to look at everyone on a case-by-case basis. But if you've got a club player who's presenting with way too much right side bend, the pelvis is in good space, but the gap between the pelvis and the thorax in terms of lateral sway is too great, I'd probably be working on improving head movement, and probably stabilizing pivot. There's a decent chance that the player has shifted quite a long way off the ball with their torso and backswing, and they struggle to then translate that into forward swing. I'd probably be looking at their tilts. Decent chance that someone that has moved to the right probably come out a left side bend. So I'd probably be looking to identify the root cause. And if the root cause is just that that's their movement pattern, then I'm just going to hold their head and get them to keep hitting it until they hit it better.
Great. There's so many nuances to it, but it comes from experience and seeing that cause and effect for sure. How about this one? Between force or pressure, and you've mentioned pressure several times, which one do you like to use, and when do you use either?
The great thing about doing what we do for a living is that when you get a question like that, you can always say it depends.
Of course.
I will generally start to reference force when we're looking at speed. So when I've measured Ollie, for example, his vertical was super low. I think it was maxing out about 145. And I knew that if we can shift his pressure more effectively, then there's a very decent chance that we're going to be able to see his force increase. And his force increased to 175, 180, his vertical force 175 or 180 by the end of the session. But I've used the pressure shift to influence the force. Generally, when I see low force numbers, it's a product of poor pressure shift in terms of magnitude and timing. Not always, but that would be a pattern that I've seen.
In pressure, because it's so much less expensive, do you believe that it solves a good chunk of the challenges that that say a mid handicapper faces by looking at the timings of their center of pressure and movements? Or you said you use force for speed. Not everybody's working on speed. What's the ideal scenario for pressure usage?
So I think you can gain a great deal from just looking at a pressure trace. And generally, this is me. This is not a rule, but the majority of club players we deal with don't move enough pressure, they don't move it soon enough, and they don't change direction soon enough. Those that do move enough pressure generally stay to the right-hand side of the golf ball or to the trail side of the golf ball way too long. So is it the amount of pressure, or is it the timing of the pressure? And the same can be said of force. That a lot of people can generate good force. I can generate reasonable force. Unfortunately, my vertical force has happened when the ball's 15 yards off the club face, so it's of no use to anyone.
Right, right.
Again, I think I'm not trying to avoid the question here. That everyone has to be viewed on a case-by-case basis. And as coaches, if we can really get effective at using the technology at our disposal, I think that, and using those experiences to better your coaching skill, then you're going to be able to answer that "it depends" question much more effectively. But as a general rule, club players don't shift enough, number one, and they don't shift early enough in both directions, as a rule. They don't get to the left side of the golf ball or the lead side of the golf ball soon enough. And guess what? The majority of our club players don't have control of low point, the single most important impact factor.
I've heard you mention that before. Speaking of things to summarize, because everybody wants it in a nutshell, and it's never always that easy given how complex the golf swing is and the fact that we're humans and everybody does it differently. And we've all seen you give people a metal stick and it's crazy what they make it do sometimes. But what advice would you give a new coach on how to work with 3D data? Are there any must-know or foundational principles that you could touch on?
I think identifying ranges. I personally don't like using ranges because for me that oversimplifies it. But identifying ranges that are acceptable or functional, and when you're outside of that, dysfunctional, number one. Number two, then trying to figure out, well, when you get a player that's out of position and they make it work, why do they make it work? I've seen a ton of coaches over the years getting really into 3D, and the challenge is that the more into the 3D they get, the more away from the ball flight and the impact they get. Our one job as golf coaches is to improve impact. If we're not doing that, our players are not getting better, period. I don't care if it looks better on camera. If you're not getting the club and the ball better, that player is not going to play better. And given that our one job is to make people play better golf, we've flat out failed. So unless the data is affecting that player's impact characteristics, it's not relevant. I'm not saying it's incorrect, it's just the wrong time and the wrong place. But when it comes to using your technology, for me, and I'm not just saying this, the metrics that Onform put up, I think are perfect for actually most levels of coaches. I'm no scientist, trust me, I'm definitely not a biomechanic, I ain't that smart. But being able to have that limited amount of data and understand and interpret that data relative to impact is basically the heart of my coaching.
Incredible. Well, speaking of the heart of your coaching, the Coach Hub is a place where your coaches, from all over the world come together and discuss stuff like this. So it's a great place to learn and collaborate. I wanted to give a shout out to you and what you're trying to do to bring people together, to provide alternate teaching methods, or just discussion even in a safe place to learn from each other, because there's so much capability now. We're proud that we can bring things like 3D data and make it more accessible, right? It's been around for decades, but unless you went into a lab and suited up in a crazy avatar suit with the little dots, which we have behind us here, you just don't have access to these numbers. And what good is it if you can't actually have access to the numbers? Well, now that the access is there, the learning has to follow along with it. So I love what you're doing with Coach Hub, and I love, you'll see a lot more from Onform this year in terms of coach education, and this certainly won't be the last time that we talk. It's we're 52 minutes in, and I want to be respectful of everybody. We try and keep these shorter. I've got 20 more questions that I'd love to get to, but I think we're going to have to start to wrap it up. Any last parting words before I jump into a quick PGA show preview that you'd like to leave with anybody regarding 3D?
I think the same applies to any technology. Whatever technology you choose to employ, and I've said there's so much amazing technology available, but become the very best at using that technology. And people will always say there's question marks over accuracy because it's a 2D camera, or it can't do it because it's a radar that's behind the golf ball. That at least you have a baseline for each and every player. Become world class with the technology you've got. I see so many coaches who've got every piece of technology in the sun, under the sun, and they're not making good use of any of them. Become expert with a limited amount of technology is far better, from my point of view, than having lots of technology and not really knowing how they all talk to one another and how you can use that to make the player better.
I love that. Become an expert at the technology that you have access to. We kind of say that even with our app, like use all the bells and whistles as you see fit, but use them at your disposal. We even had a question come up that said, how are you making such perfect circles on the screen? And I want to point out you're using an Apple Pen, I believe, one of these guys. Yeah,
I am.
Yeah, it allows you to be a little bit more precise than, well, my giant fat finger. But
I don't know if this helps anyone, but basically the way my technology is set up is that I've got front on and down the line. I record through iPhone, and that immediately uploads on iPad. So then I can use my Apple Pen to draw accurately, and I screen share my iPad onto a big TV. So it's recorded on the phone, goes straight to the iPad. My pen, I actually had a panic this afternoon because I couldn't find my Apple Pen. I'd left it in the studio, lost it somewhere in the studio. So I think, holy cow, I've now got to do a webinar with Onform, and I don't have my the most important piece of kit I own, the Apple Pen.
All right, buddy. Cool. It's so awesome, Hugh. Thanks for showing us through that. I'm going to try and share my screen here real quick and hopefully get this to work for everybody to see. I think I am showing our PGA preview here. There's a few more things that we have coming. And that is one thing you're seeing right here is club tracking. We get asked about this regularly, and I can't wait to show everybody we're doing now full club tracking. We currently do wrist tracking, but you'll see club tracking come very soon. Come to the PGA show, you'll see that. Another one, and this is maybe more in line with some key coaching tools, kinematic sequence. This is all about the timing of the swing, how you actually create the energy that you do. This, for people that haven't seen it, something that Greg Rose and many others at TPI talk about all the time. And making this accessible, which shows the way the pelvis and torso and arm move, the rotational velocity or accelerations, I should say, really, during the swing at address, top, and impact. We're excited to finally get this in the hands of people because, again, it's been talked about for years, but it's been impossible to access. And you'll notice at the bottom of the screenshot here, the colored data. So yes, we will have some PGA Tour reference ranges, and in time we will allow you to customize those per player, because certainly I can't move like Rory, so why compare me to Rory? We'll allow coaches to customize these ranges per player so that they can work on achieving the rotations and the translational numbers like lift, sway, thrust that you want to dictate for that player. So some really cool things. And then lastly, we're also going to be revealing a whole new product line that we've been working on for a long time called Multicam Max. And if you followed along, we already do multicam now with iOS devices, but soon you'll be able to use fixed cameras like I'm showing here. And so you'll be able to walk into a studio, a multiple bay studio with your iPad and actually see the feed from your fixed cameras on your iPad wirelessly. It's a great new set of functionality that we're creating, essentially taking advantage of not only these really high-end 500 frames per second cameras, but existing cameras like the FLIR Blackfly that are used in studios all over. And you'll be able to simply walk in, say connect to Bay 1 and see the feed of those cameras on your iPad. And if your next lesson is in Bay 3, you walk over to Bay 3 and say connect to Bay 3 and you'll see the feed from those and allow you to truly control fixed cameras from your iPad. We'll be demoing that at the show as well, and we can't wait to start getting that out there. It's the first time we've talked about it publicly. So lots to show at the PGA show. I'm going to wrap up here in just under an hour. This has been awesome. It's been one of our most well-attended webinars. Hugh, thanks again. Check your emails, everybody, for a discount for an invite to the Coach Hub. Appreciate you joining us. Hugh, have a great evening over there in the UK. We will definitely see you again.
Thank you, Garrett.
Cheers, everybody.